And for your church, we're reminded of how great you are, not just when we meet, although we are when we meet, but we're reminded every day when we get to wake up and see your creation, get to experience this life. Please help us not to waste it. Please help us to be investing in your kingdom every day. We are very grateful for Jesus. Thank you for saving us. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, we're in chapter 9. Chapter 9. And we're not midway through. We're in verse 1. Verse 1. We really powered through last week and went way long and finished up chapter 8. So chapter 9, verse 1. Dun, dun, dun. Now, in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. Pause. I had not a heart attack this week, but I really couldn't. I heard the word Adar in the middle of the week, and I couldn't place. Yeah, I couldn't place where it was. And I was like, where is it? Where is it? And then I'm preparing for the class, and I go, I know where it is. It's right here. Month of Adar, Adar. On the 13th day, resume, unpause. On the 13th day, when the king's command and edict were about to be executed, on the day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain the mastery over them, it was turned to the contrary, so that the Jews themselves gain the mastery over those who hated them. Question 1, did the second edict sent out by Mordecai prove to be effective?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I like that answer. Oh, yeah. Very much so. And we asked if there was enough time, I believe, last week. Hey, was there enough time for this to happen? Well, they had 9 months of preparation. 9 months to get ready for it and get ready for one day, you know. Yep, 9 months. So I wanted to comment here. I was talking to Roger before class, and he reminded me of something. He reminded me that, so it was turned to the contrary here. Verse 1. Turned to the contrary. By who? Who turned that to the contrary? The Jews. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say you're wrong. You know, what I want to point out here is this book never mentions God, but you can see God moving, right? And Roger reminded me of this with the prostitute that saved the 12 spies, Rahab. What did she tell them? What did she tell them when she hid them? We've heard about you.
People are afraid.
And the people are afraid. And when you wipe out my people, be nice to me and my family, right? You can see God moving there. You can see God moving, even though, you know, it's, how did God prepare the way for his people? Well, he went before them. And a lot of times they were too terrified to even do anything. And it reminds me also of this guy named Gideon. Remember Gideon? What did God do for Gideon? I mean, God did so many things for Gideon. You know, the fleece, the wet and dry, and then 30,000 men down to like 300, whatever it was. I didn't look up the numbers beforehand. But, you know, hey, anyone who's afraid, tell them to go away. What? There goes everybody, you know. But what did God tell Gideon to do right before he goes to war? Does anybody remember? He says, if you're scared, go down to the camp. Went down to the camp, and he heard these two guys talking. I said guys, I don't know, two people talking. And one guy had a nightmare and was like terrified, and the other guy said, this can only be Gideon, right? Oh, man. And it just reminds me that God, you know, God takes care of his people, and sometimes in ways we don't even credit him for. And that, you know, this doesn't even mention God in this book, and that I think that's probably on purpose, but it's a good reminder for us is it was turned to the contrary. Who turned, you know, who made the people afraid and became proselytes, became Jews who weren't even Jews? You know, I think God is really moving, and it's just really fascinating to me. And I wanted to thank Roger for reminding me about that. I was going to just skip right over that, and then he got me thinking, and I just really like that. So the second edict went out, 9 months of preparation, and more than enough time. It was effective. It was very effective. Verse 2, the Jews assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes to lay hands on those who sought their harm. And no one could stand before them for the dread of them had fallen all over the peoples. Again, I just see this, I see God moving in ways that we don't always see. Were both Jews and non-Jews prepared to do battle? Yep. Both of them are ready. Question 2, what dread had fallen on all the peoples? Fear. Specifically, this fear that fell on them, we touched on it last week a little bit, and I wanted to reiterate it a little bit more. The first edict went out, and the people were confused. Okay, we're supposed to kill a bunch of people in 11 months from now, whatever. And then the second edict goes out, and this one, when it goes out, is far different from the first one. You can't take back an edict sealed by the king in his ring, and can't do that. But they're looking at this, and they can see a clear shift in the tone of it, right? And they can tell now these people that were supposed to be attacked are now backed by the king. And not just the king, but the king's favorite guy, the number 2 guy, Mordecai. His fame is just spreading throughout the whole land of Persia. So can you imagine this dread is knowing that, okay, these people are backed by the king now. So I can understand a little confusion as to what to do, but if I'm them and I know it's coming on one day, I'm thinking, that's a good day for a vacation. I think I'll conveniently just be gone that day. I don't want to. I don't know. I know that's not how things worked back then. But both the king and the second most powerful man in all of Persia were on the side of the Jews, and I think that makes a big difference for the dread that fell upon them. So, verse 3. Even all the princes of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and those who were doing the king's business assisted the Jews, because the dread of Mordecai had fallen on them. Oh, more dread, just more dread. Question 1, did the highest authorities help the Jews? Sounds like it. Sounds like they did. Question 2, in what ways did they assist the Jews? Now this is a little bit less clear. It's been suggested to me that probably not physically. How does a government and authorities today assist someone? They throw money on them sometimes.
Restrain somebody else.
They restrain someone else, throw money at them.
I think they help them arm themselves when they were looking.
Provide some stuff to defend themselves, arm them. I think rather than physically aiding them, they provided moral aid and support that a government would easily gives to whatever side it favors. I think that's what we're supposed to get out of this. That and the dread, the dread of Mordecai. Verse 4, indeed Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai became greater and greater. We just see this guy who's a nobody, in the matter of a couple months, become someone just... His fame spread. He became greater and greater. I mean, how else do you describe that if it isn't God taking care of his people? I think there's a lot of supernatural influence here. I think that is the explanation. What explains the growing popularity of Mordecai? God. Verse 5. Thus the Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. Does this verse suggest complete victory of the Jews over their enemy? Simple answer, yeah. I don't know how else to describe they did as they pleased to those who hated them. That's question 2. What is the significance of the phrase, they did what they pleased to those who hated them? I think, again, this is because they're backed by the king. When you're backed by the king, you have a little bit more confidence. I think it's similar to doing something knowing you're right versus doing something knowing you're wrong. When you're right and you know you're right, you got a little bit more confidence. You got that confidence. that, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so they're backed by the king. We have come to verse 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I don't want to read them. You'll forgive me if I don't read especially 7, 8, and 9. I think I'll just read 6, talk about 7, 8, and 9, and then read 10. Verse 6 is, at the citadel in Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. And then there are 10 names. Not even going to try to tackle them. Forgive me. I don't feel that brave. These 10, verse 10, the 10 sons of Haman, thus the 10 names beforehand. They are hard to read. They are very hard to read. And I struggle with basic English words. I don't know if you've noticed that. Sometimes they get mixed together. And yeah, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Jews' enemy, but they did not lay hands on the plunder. So, question 1, did the Jews have to protect themselves in the capital city of Susa? Yeah, they had to protect themselves even where the edict came out from. And question 2, who are those named in the verse? Sons of Haman. And by all means, feel free to read them yourself. So, one thing I wanted to comment on is when we're going to talk about the Feast of Purim a little bit later on in this chapter. If we make it there tonight, that's great. And when they would read for the Feast of Purim, they would read the book of Esther, and they would also have a fast, and they would have a feast, and they'd celebrate and give gifts, and it was like a holiday for them. When they got to these verses, and they would read them all, it was tradition for them to read it all in one breath, because these are all the really bad people, and they, it's the type of thing where I hear Papa talk about it, and they would train their kids. They'd be like, hey, all right, here's what you're going to do. We're going to read this, and what we're going to do is make all these noises while we're doing it and shake these bells, and because these are the bad people, and we don't want to. I thought that was fun. So tradition holds that they would say them all together as fast as they can because they all died together. So if you ever have the privilege of attending a Purim feast because you have a friend that's Jewish or whatever, you'll be less thrown off guard now, and you're welcome. Question 3, sarcasm. What did the Jews not do that they could have done? Plundered, yeah. This reminds me of something that we've talked about a little bit before. Reminds me of this really big guy named Saul. Remember this guy named Saul? He was told by God, you need to go and kill the Agagites. It's the Agagites, right? Yeah, you need to go kill the Agag and the Amalekites. Thank you, the Amalekites. So go kill them. Kill them all. Wipe them out. They're evil. And what did Saul do? Well, he said, oh yeah, I did it. Of course I did it. What are we talking about? And what's the line that what does Samuel say?
What is this bleating of sheep?
Yeah, but then what is this bleating of sheep I hear? Bah, in the background. Well, we saved that for a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And we killed most of the people. They didn't kill Agag, the king. And we talked about this. What did Samuel do? Cut him into pieces. Just. You think Samuel was a even-keeled, even-tempered guy? Man, I have a lot of respect for someone who has so much passion for what God says. They tore him up. And it's better to obey, right? It's better to obey than to offer sacrifices. And this reminds me of that because it's the opposite. It's the opposite. They could have plundered them. They could have taken whatever. They could have, I don't know. Instead, they didn't take any of it. Didn't take any of it. And I don't know. It's like Saul but reversed. And I think that's neat. Verse 11. On that day, the number of those who were killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king. Question 1, was it customary to report all the numbers of people who died and carefully make out the record? It was. It was. It's kind of a rhetorical question. Obviously it was. That's why we're talking about it. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now that we got that straightened out. Verse 12. The king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and 10 of the sons of Haman at the citadel in Susa. What then have they done for the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. And what is your further request? It will be done. Question 1. Does the king notice the victories the Jews experienced? Yes. Yes, he does. Question 2. Does the king keep Esther informed of the results and the conflicts between the Jews and the non-Jews? Again, yes. Why do I ask this? Do you remember earlier in this book, Esther? There's a huge difference here. It's so much different. Esther didn't even know about the first decree that went out. Mordecai had to tell her. And he had to show her the decree that went out because he was wailing at the gates. Couldn't go into the king's place. And what a difference, you know.
She had to talk to the king in 30 days.
30 days without being summoned to him and stuff. Isn't there a huge difference here? I thought that was notable. As far as he goes out of his way and tells her what happens from the king, directly from the king. That's, I don't know. There's a big difference. Think of that as you will. I thought that was interesting. Question 3. Does the king sense that something else may need to be done to assure the safety of the Jews? Seems like it. Apparently it does. Apparently he does. And he gives Esther an opportunity to make a request. So, here's what Esther says in verse 13. Then said Esther, if it pleases the king, then let tomorrow be granted to the Jews who are in Susa to do according to the edict of today, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. I thought his 10 sons were already dead. Hanged on the gallows.
Isn't it disrespectful to take a body and not
Oh. Yeah, this is interesting, right? This is something else. Yeah, this reminds me of a lot of movies. Greg, is that what you're going to say?
Well, I was going to say it reminds me of the Romans and maybe the Assyrians. You know, you put those bodies up there as a warning to anybody else that might be thinking of.
It makes a pretty strong statement, right? And especially if we remember back that the gallows and hanging probably didn't mean gallows and hanging. This reminds me of those movies where I was trying to think of specifically what movies I was thinking of, and I couldn't remember. But there's those movies where they just take the heads and they on a pike. It's gross. It's gross, but it makes a strong point. If you're walking up to a city and you see these impaled things, okay, don't mess with whoever did that. Reminds me of Pirates too. I think, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe the Wild West when they used to have the bodies hanging from the trees of the people who stole or whatever. I don't know. Maybe. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the Assyrians used to pile up the heads at the gate of the city when they conquered a city.
And that is why I really like history. Fascinating stuff. But so, question 2, but let's go with question 1 first, I guess. Does Esther respond to the king's willingness to take further actions? Yes, she does. And does she seem to be vindictive here? Seems a little bit, but probably not. It's been suggested that she has been, but probably not. I don't know. If you really want to protect your people, I think it's a smart move more than a vindictive move. Although it sure could be both. What's the purpose? We already talked about this. What's the purpose of hanging his 10 sons again? It sends a very strong warning. And I don't know, you have to be blind to miss the warning.
Well, and on the practical nature, for anyone in this culture who's very, very superstitious about their body after they're dead, who might be inclined to try to do vengeance like Haman did, what better way to make it known to their kids, like, don't you dare mess with these people again, because look what happened to the last guy. Because for some people, it's like, well, I can die an honorable death.
Yeah.
But not if you die in your...
Not if you're
die in
desecrated
your burial
afterwards,
and your
yeah.
kids are desecrated. And
Oh,
and
man.
stuff. So it really would be a very strong deterrent. So I could see how it seems vindictive, but it may not have been at all. It may have just been, hey, this is
Yeah.
what you have to do, or else.
I think we have to put her actions into context in order to make which it sure could have been, but I don't think it was. I don't think it was vindictive.
Well, it wouldn't have been for personal reasons, but more for God's people, right?
I would hope so. It seems like that, right? I can't tell you for sure. Because it's hard to say. But last point I'm going to make on this is some of us learn audibly, some of us learn by doing, some of us learn visually. This is covering a lot of bases. This covers a lot for me. So I really do think it's for preservation of her people. Yeah.
They're dead, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Okay.
smell, I got it, the smell.
This is the smell. Too far. Here we go. Verse 14. So the king commanded that it shall be done. It should be done so. And the edict was issued in Susa. And Haman's 10 sons were hanged. So the king keeps his word to Esther. In verse 15, the Jews who were in Susa assembled also on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Susa, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Question 1, is it likely these 300 men were in a different section of the city? It's likely. It's likely. Generally speaking, cities back then, especially a citadel, fortress, would have a walled section. And then a walled section, I think, would be where Haman was and all the people he really had a lot of influence on, so his sons and stuff would probably be up there. And it seems like, just from reading this, the first day they really had a lot going on up there, and they didn't even make it down to the lower housing areas. So walled with like the important people and stuff up here, and then they'd have a lot more housing and stuff below the wall. Maybe not literally below, but on the outside of the wall. And it seems like it's probably, not sure, this is a speculation, but probably a different part of the city that they handled the second day. But presumably Haman's strongest support was from the walled area, so the 500 probably would be there, and then the 300. Again, please pay attention to probably. I'm not telling you for sure. But it does mention 300 people, additional people. So what's the emphasis in this verse again? No plunder. Again, yeah, again. It's really making a point. They can take whatever they want from these people, and they're not. It breaks some stupid stereotypes sometimes. You know, people, well, they're only doing that because they can get, advantage from it. Who was one of the forefathers, and this just came to my head, forgive me if I'm wrong on the names and stuff, Abraham or Isaac or one of those guys, didn't want to get rich from a certain person. He's like, I don't want to get, they might say that they helped me get rich, I don't want that. There was a guy who started an orphanage. We talked about him at lunch. What was his name?
George Mueller.
George Mueller. Have you guys heard of George Mueller? My understanding from my dad earlier today is he never asked for money. Never asked for money. He would pray. He's a real man of God, real faithful. And he started an orphanage. Anyways, I don't want to draw this out, but if someone gave him money and he found out that money came from somewhere evil, somewhere he shouldn't take money from, he always gave it back. Because he didn't want that to, didn't want to get his money from that. That defeats the purpose. I was like, I forgot where I was going with this. Yeah, they didn't take the plunder of these people because that wasn't the point. They were defending themselves. So, and they sure could have. So, just an interesting to me.
This is 1423.
Thank you. 1423. Who was it? Abraham?
Abraham saying, refusing to take plunder when he defeated the kings. Yeah, that took Lot.
Thank you for referencing that for me. I should do a little more research before I teach it, but that's the one right there. Okay. Verse 16 here. Yeah, verse 16. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces assembled to defend their lives and rid themselves of their enemies and killed 75,000 of those who hated them. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. So they were defending themselves throughout the whole nation. I want to mention here, there's 800 people in Susa got killed. There were 94 cities. I did a little math. You know what the 800 times 94 is? 75,200. It's pretty cool. I mentioned that because apparently we've talked about the Septuagint once or twice, and it's not always super accurate in these areas. The Septuagint mentions, I think, that there were only 15,000 people that died instead of 75,000, and I don't think that's right. We just don't think so. So, what's mentioned, emphasized in this verse again? They did not plunder their enemies. Is that a third time now?
But I find it interesting
Uh-huh.
because it'd be a little hard to, somebody had to spread the word about not taking plunder. Now, it doesn't talk about it here, but if it wasn't part of the edict, then, well, how did they all know not to take the plunder? I doubt that many people in different areas would come to the same idea. So either God had to be involved in that or something.
That's a really good point. A really good point. And I do wonder if the temperament of the Jews was the same throughout the whole 120. But even then, you're right. That's unique. If that happens, it doesn't happen very often or ever. That might be a God thing too, huh? Yeah. This book points to God so many times in so many ways. It's a good point. Verse 17. Oh, we were at 16. We're almost halfway through the chapter. Wow. We got 4 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Verse 17. This was done on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Did it take longer in Susa than it took for other places in the empire to defend themselves? It took longer. It took 1 day longer. And I really think, sue me if I'm wrong. I have no money, so take whatever you want. I really think that's because that's where Haman lived, and that's where he had his influence. Strongest influence would be close to him, and I think that's probably why it took longer. Could definitely be wrong. Verse 18 and 19. But the Jews who were in Susa assembled on the 13th day and the 14th day of the same month, and they rested on the 15th day and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. 19. Therefore, the Jews of the rural areas, who lived in rural towns, make the 14th day of the month of Adar a holiday for rejoicing and feasting, and sending portions of food to one another. Sending portions of food to one another. Verses 20, 21, and 22. Then Mordecai recorded these events. He sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Xerxes, both near and far, obliging them to celebrate the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day of the same month annually, because on those days the Jews rid themselves of their enemies, and it was a month which was turned for them from sorrow to gladness, and from mourning to a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and rejoicing, and send portions of food to one another and gifts to the poor. Question 1, how was the holiday celebrated? Feasting, the best way. The best way. Food. Yeah. Feasting, enjoy. And there's also one other thing it kind of mentions here. Gifts. What a great way to celebrate. What a great way to celebrate. Rejoicing, sending portions of food to one another, and gifts to the poor. Gifts to the poor. Thus, the Jews undertook what they started to do and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the adversary of the Jews, had schemed against the Jews to destroy them and had cast Pur, that is Lot, to disturb them and destroy them. does this verse explain how the feast, the word Purim of the feast, the name of the feast was selected? Kind of, yeah. Isn't that kind of a neat? Remember what Haman did for several months? Cast lots, kind of played with the idea of killing all the Jews. Played with it for a while until it finally kind of lined up the way he wanted it. Sounded like he did it for a long time. And what an appropriate name for a feast of casting lots, as in kind of mocking him, in my mind. It may not have been that way, but the feast of casting lots, Purim. I wanted to, oh yeah, okay. It's based off the word pur. We talk about Hebrew sometimes. This word is not Hebrew. It is not Hebrew. It is an old Persian word. Fun fact for you. Don't care a lot about languages. Some of you do. I just wanted to relay that to you. Okay. Let's pick up in verse 25 next week. And what I'm hoping to do, because chapter 10, Papa tells a story. Let me tell you this story real quick. When Papa was a little guy, 10, 9, 8, 7, younger. I don't know how much younger. He was a little guy. I know he could read. In their church, they would have these times where they kind of did an annual, like a church thing where how many books of the Bible can we read? And he says, the type of thing, they come in, kind of like a revival throughout the week. I think they would come in and they would say how many books they read today or how many chapters they read today. And Papa says there's this little boy who just was smoking everybody, just racking up all these books. He's just reading. And Papa was like, man, how is he doing that? And so he went up to him and said, how do you do it? Man, you must be reading all the time. And the little boy says to him, well, I pick the shortest books every time. And so he, as the books you can read in 2 minutes, and he just reread them. And and at the end of the week, the congregation read all these books, and wow, so good. And Papa tells that because chapter 10 is the whole 3 verses. You can read it in one breath. Next week, I hope we'll finish chapter 9. We'll spend an hour on chapter 10. We'll cover that real quick. And I was hoping to just go over some maps with you and some timelines, and do a little review, just to kind of end the book together. So, sorry, I like that story. I wanted to tell it. So, will you bow with me, please? Dear God, thank you for your word again. Thank you that we can go from here with the light to our feet and something to guide our path. You are too good to us. You help us every day. Please help us not to neglect our relationship with you. Please help us not to neglect telling others about you. Please help us to take your word and to hide it in our hearts every day. We love you and thank you again. In Jesus' name, amen. 25. I better mark that down.